Death rarely arrives the way movies show it. There is no sudden switch, no instant silence, no clean ending. For most people, death is a process, a quiet, unsettling sequence of events unfolding inside the body, often unnoticed, often misunderstood, and almost always invisible. 30 minutes before death, the body does not know it is dying, but it knows something is wrong, very wrong. 30 minutes before death, the body is still fighting, not emotionally, not consciously, biologically. Every cell, every system, every instinct, shaped by millions of years of evolution, is focused on a single goal: to stay alive. And the way the body does this is both fascinating and disturbing. Long before modern medicine, humans sensed that death came in stages. Ancient Greek physicians described a gradual cooling of the body before death. Medieval doctors believed life slowly retreated from the limbs toward the chest. In Victorian England, families watched for subtle signs: the slowing breath, the distant gaze, believing the soul loosened its grip before departing. They did not understand the biology, but they were observing something real. Because death does not begin in the heart, and it does not begin in the lungs, it begins much deeper. 30 minutes before death, the brain is usually the first organ to sense danger, not in words, not in thoughts, but in chemistry. The brain constantly monitors oxygen levels, blood pressure, and the balance of gases in the blood. When oxygen drops or blood flow weakens, the brain reacts instantly. It activates survival mode. Adrenaline floods the bloodstream. The same chemical released during extreme fear or sudden shock surges through the body. The heart beats faster. Blood vessels tighten, breathing accelerates, but becomes less efficient. The body is trying to force oxygen into circulation, and then it makes a decision. A cold, calculated one. 30 minutes before death, the body begins shutting down what it considers non-essential. Blood flow is reduced to the skin, to the digestive system, to the hands and feet. This is why people near death often feel cold, even in warm rooms. Fingers turn pale or bluish. Skin becomes clammy. The body is pulling resources inward toward the heart and brain. Everything else becomes expendable. This response evolved to save lives. Thousands of years ago, it could buy precious time after injury. But when the damage is irreversible, massive trauma, cardiac failure, oxygen deprivation, the same survival response becomes the beginning of the end. One of the first visible changes appears in breathing. It becomes irregular, not slower at first. Uneven, deep breaths followed by shallow ones, long pauses that feel uncomfortable to witness, sudden gasps that seem to come from nowhere. Doctors recognized this pattern centuries ago. In the 1800s, it was named Cheney-Stokes respiration. It signals that the brain is losing precise control over breathing. Carbon dioxide levels rise, oxygen levels fall. The blood chemistry begins to shift. Blood is more than a delivery system, it is a living environment. 30 minutes before death, that environment turns hostile. As oxygen drops, cells switch to emergency metabolism. This produces lactic acid. The blood slowly becomes more acidic. Enzymes stop working efficiently, proteins lose their structure, cell membranes weaken. This does not happen dramatically, it happens silently, at a microscopic level, and once it begins, it is almost impossible to stop. The heart, however, refuses to give up easily. Even when oxygen levels fall dangerously low, the heart continues to beat, at first faster, harder, then less organized. The electrical signals that keep the heartbeat steady begin to misfire. Rhythms become irregular. This is why pulses near death can feel weak, uneven, or unpredictable. The heart is exhausted, but it keeps trying. Ancient civilizations believed the heart housed the soul. Modern science disagrees, yet in one sense they were not entirely wrong. The heart is often the last major organ still fighting to keep the body alive. As oxygen deprivation worsens, consciousness begins to change. It does not vanish suddenly, it fades. The brain is extremely sensitive to oxygen loss. When levels fall, higher functions shut down first. Clear thinking weakens. Judgment fades. Awareness narrows. This is why people near death may seem confused or strangely calm. The brain is simplifying reality. Throughout history, people have described vivid mental experiences near death. Roman soldiers wrote of memories flooding their minds before fatal injuries. Medieval texts speak of sudden clarity before collapse. Modern neuroscience suggests a possible explanation. As oxygen drops, the brain experiences bursts of disorganized electrical activity. Memory centers activate unpredictably. The brain is not replaying life, it is misfiring. But to the person experiencing it, it feels deeply real. One of the most surprising truths about this stage is pain. It does not always increase. In many cases, it fades. As the brain struggles, endorphins, natural pain-relieving chemicals, are released. The body attempts to soften the experience. This may explain why some dying individuals appear peaceful despite severe injury. It is not acceptance. It is biology. Muscle control begins to fail next. Muscles rely on precise electrical signals and constant energy. 30 minutes before death, both begin to break down. Muscle tone weakens. Reflexes slow. Jaw muscles relax. Speech becomes slurred or stops entirely. Even blinking may slow. Eyes may remain partially open, not from awareness, but from failing muscle control. For centuries, this was interpreted as the soul leaving the body. The truth is far less poetic. It is neuromuscular failure. Time perception also begins to distort. People who survive near-death events often describe time slowing down. Seconds feel stretched. Moments feel unreal. This happens because the brain regions that process time require stable oxygen levels. As those systems fail, perception fractures. Reality feels distant, dreamlike, unstable. 30 minutes before death, the brain is no longer experiencing the world the way it once did. It is slipping, quietly, relentlessly. And yet, despite everything failing, despite chemistry collapsing, despite systems shutting down, the body keeps fighting. Because survival is not a choice, it is instinct. But this is only the beginning. Because what happens next, in the final minutes, is far stranger and far more unsettling. As the final minutes draw closer, the body grows quieter on the outside. But inside, everything becomes unstable. 10 minutes before death, the balance that keeps cells alive is almost gone. Not broken yet, just barely holding. The brain now enters its final phase of activity. It is the most oxygen-hungry organ in the body. When oxygen delivery falls below a critical level, the brain is forced into emergency mode. Electrical signals lose their order. Neurons begin firing without coordination. Thoughts no longer follow logic. Awareness narrows. The outside world starts to fade. Some people stop responding completely. Others do something unexpected. They speak, not softly, not slowly, but suddenly. Throughout history, caregivers noticed this strange phenomenon. People who had been silent or confused for hours, or even days, would suddenly become alert. They would recognize loved ones, say clear goodbyes, speak with a calm that felt impossible. Centuries ago, this was called a final awakening. Today, it is known as terminal lucidity. Modern science suggests this happens when the brain releases its last reserves of neurotransmitters, a final surge of organization before collapse. It is not recovery, it is the brain using its last energy all at once. As oxygen starvation worsens, damage reaches the core of every cell. Cells can no longer control what enters or leaves them. Calcium floods into places it should never be. Enzymes that once built and repaired now begin to destroy. Cells start digesting themselves from the inside. Once this process begins, it cannot be reversed. The blood becomes increasingly acidic. With every breath that fails to deliver enough oxygen, the chemistry of life shifts further away from balance. Proteins lose their shape. Reactions slow or stop. Energy production collapses. Life becomes chemically unsustainable. The heart is still beating, but it is no longer beating correctly. Electrical signals that once followed precise paths now scatter. The rhythm becomes chaotic, fast, then slow, then uneven. This is why a pulse near death often feels unpredictable. The heart is not choosing to stop. It is losing the instructions that tell it how to continue. Centuries ago, physicians described this moment as the trembling heart. They believed life was shaking loose. What they were seeing was electrical failure. Breathing now becomes mechanical. The conscious brain no longer controls it. Only the brainstem remains active. This part of the brain is ancient. It does not think, it reacts. Breaths come in clusters, then stop, then return. Each pause grows longer. Each breath sounds heavier. To witness this is deeply unsettling, but it is not suffering. It is automation. The body is running on its oldest survival system. Sensation continues to fade. Vision weakens. Touch becomes distant. Hearing often remains the longest. This is why people near death may still react to voices even when they cannot respond. The brain lets go of sight first, then touch, then sound. Pain perception changes again. At this stage, pain is often absent. The brain no longer has the resources to process it. Natural sedatives, endorphins, flood the system. The face may appear calm. The body is not at peace. It is shutting down. Time perception collapses completely. The brain can no longer measure sequence. There is no clear before or after. Moments stretch, then fragment. This explains why people who survive near-death experiences describe a sense of timelessness. The brain is no longer tracking reality. It is losing structure. There is a moment, usually 4 to 6 minutes before death, when the brain crosses a critical threshold. Beyond this point, even if oxygen suddenly returns, recovery is no longer possible. Brain cells begin to die. Once neurons die, they do not regenerate. This is the point medicine fears most, because beyond it, survival becomes irreversible loss. Muscle tone disappears. The jaw relaxes. The body grows heavy. Breathing pauses become longer than breaths. The heart continues, but weakly, irregularly, like a machine running without instructions. Throughout history, this stage was described simply as the passing, not because something mystical occurred, but because observers could see the moment the body stopped fighting. If awareness still exists, it is minimal. Fear requires complex processing. That system is already gone. If consciousness remains, it is fragmented, detached, distant from the body itself. And then, the final moments arrive. The ones that cannot be stopped. The ones no medicine can interrupt. The ones where the body crosses a line it cannot return from. In the final minutes, the body no longer struggles the way it once did. There is no surge of strength, no dramatic reversal, only exhaustion. Every system that once worked together now operates alone, disconnected, failing at its own pace. The heart is still beating, but it is no longer beating with purpose. Each contraction is weaker than the last. Blood pressure collapses. Circulation slows to a crawl. Organs that depended on a steady flow of oxygen-rich blood are now starved completely. The brain is first to suffer. Inside the skull, neurons begin to fall silent. Not all at once. In waves. The most complex regions, those responsible for thought, identity, and memory, shut down first. What remains active are the most ancient parts of the brain, the parts designed only to keep the body alive. For a few moments longer, breathing reaches its final pattern. Long pauses, then a deep, reflexive breath, then another pause. This has been described across centuries, across cultures. The sound has many names, but the meaning is always the same. The brainstem is failing. Breathing is no longer controlled. It is happening only because the body remembers how. The chest rises, then falls, and then it doesn't rise again. For a brief moment, the heart may continue beating. This surprises many people. Death does not happen at a single instant. The heart is a resilient muscle. It can continue contracting even after the brain has lost consciousness, sometimes for seconds, sometimes for over a minute. But without oxygen, those beats are empty. They move blood that can no longer support life. Inside the brain, something strange occurs. Electrical activity spikes, not organized, not meaningful, a final burst. Modern monitoring has shown that in the moments just after the heart stops, the brain can briefly show heightened electrical patterns. This does not mean awareness. It does not mean thought. It is the last discharge of dying cells, a final flicker before silence. Throughout history, this moment was misunderstood. Some believed it was the soul departing. Others believed it was a final vision. Science offers a colder explanation. Cells deprived of oxygen release their remaining energy all at once. It looks dramatic, but it is not life returning. It is life ending. Minutes pass. Without circulation, brain cells die rapidly. Within 4 to 6 minutes, damage becomes irreversible. The structures that once created personality, emotion, and memory are destroyed. There is no pain. Pain requires a functioning brain. At this stage, there is none. Muscles relax completely. The jaw loosens. The body becomes still. Eyes may remain partially open, not from awareness, but from loss of muscle tone. The warmth that once defined the body begins to fade. Heat escapes into the surrounding air. The temperature drops. This cooling was noted long before modern science. Ancient physicians used it as confirmation. They placed hands on the chest. They felt the skin. They waited. Silence. Stillness. No breath. No pulse. Only then did they accept what had already happened. Hearing, if it remains at all, fades last. This is why, across centuries, people spoke to the dying even after they appeared unresponsive, not out of superstition, out of intuition, and sometimes they were right. But now, even that final sense disappears. Inside every cell, life-supporting reactions stop. Energy production ceases, waste accumulates, structures break down. The body is no longer a living system. It is matter. What is most unsettling is not how dramatic death is, but how quiet it becomes. No scream, no signal, no clear dividing line between alive and gone. Just a gradual fading, like a sound disappearing into distance. Throughout history, humanity searched for meaning in this moment. Religions formed around it. Philosophies tried to explain it. Science attempted to measure it. Yet one truth remains unchanged. The body does not resist death forever. It resists until it cannot. 30 minutes earlier, the body was still fighting. 10 minutes earlier, it was failing. Now, there is no struggle left, only stillness. What happens after this moment is no longer biology. It is memory. It is the effect one life leaves on others. The body has finished its work. Death is not an explosion. It is not a collapse. It is a shutdown, system by system, cell by cell, until nothing remains that can be called alive. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all. That something so feared, so powerful, so final, arrives not with force, but with silence.